Okay, if you want to learn how to estimate your gross revenue for your short-term rentals, then you are in the right place because for the longest time, the biggest question I always had and what I was so afraid of was if I buy this property and turn it into a short-term rental or an Airbnb, will I make money or will I lose money? Right? That is the number one question that everybody has. So this is why we're doing this video today. I'm going to talk through at a very high level all the different steps that we're going today. And if you think it's helpful, stay until the very end because we're going to go through every single step that I talk about with the tactical steps so you can actually learn how to do it yourself from beginning to end with the actual tactical step by steps. So hit the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel at Kent underscore HE so we can always get back to you with more content, and always feel free to comment below on what other type of topics you would like to learn about. So let's start with the overall process of how you would analyze whether or not something is even a deal for a short-term rental. It starts with one, identifying what your process is to analyze the deal so that one, you don't waste your time, and then two, you can quickly get to an answer and then be efficient with your time so you can quickly look out for deals into the future. So the first step we're going to talk about is looking at the rental demand. I use airdna.co for that one data point and that one data point only, just because I personally did not find it very accurate when I first started using airdna about 2 years ago. Chances are I got a little bit better. But the second step is we need to look at whether or not it's legal to have a short-term rental in that city, municipality, or county, where or state, wherever it is that you are intending to do a short-term rental. I would always advise making sure that it is legal to have a short-term rental. Third step we do is actually what I'm calling is a geographical analysis. With a geographical analysis, you want to understand whether or not as you get further and further away from a destination, such as a downtown or a beach or a national park entrance, eventually there is a cliff or drop off in revenue as you get further and further away from that destination, right? A property that is oceanfront is going to perform very different versus something that's 10 minutes away from the beach. However, when you use free data resources and they try to help you estimate revenue, what they're going to do is they're going to lump in all the four-bedroom properties, all the five-bedroom properties within a certain geographical area. Now, you might think, obviously, like that makes sense, but it also doesn't make sense because now you're lumping in the gross revenue for a four-bedroom, a three-bedroom, or a five-bedroom property all together, no matter what their intangibles are. And by intangibles, I mean there are things that you can't do even with money or change about the property with money. That includes maybe you're perched up on a hill with a panoramic view. You can't buy that. You can't renovate that like you do by painting the home or changing up the flooring or adding a pool. You can't do that. Similarly, if your home is on the oceanfront and you can walk out right to the waters, you can't buy that. You can't just add that to a hillside home. It's very, very different. So that's what I mean by intangibles to the property and also the location, just like everything in real estate, it's all about location. That matters a lot. You have to look at, hey, as I get further and further away from the beach, from the downtown area or national park entrance, do I see a cliff or drop off in revenue the further and further I get away? Finally, we got to get to a point where once you determine your buy box for a market, I want to show you guys how you are actually able to niche down and figure out how and how do you want to design it, and who are you designing it for? Figuring out who's actually coming to the market, who is actually the revenue drivers for the top performers in your market with actual data. Don't just look at something very general. Don't look at something very big. Look at the data, and you're going to be able to see very quickly how you're going to be able to analyze a deal and look for those outsized opportunities that other people might not be looking for. So, without further ado, we are going to get into the process. So, I'm going to start by just sharing my screen, and I am going to add to the stream. Okay, now you guys can follow my data. So whenever I get a deal, and I'm gonna take a deal that I was just looking at maybe like just less than a month ago, and it sold for a price that wasn't actually a deal. And I'm gonna walk you through the process of why I thought it wasn't a deal, but I'm gonna walk through every single step that we just talked about. So the first thing we're gonna do is look, I look at this property, 6143 Madra Ave, real property. sincerely really thought about it. I even visited the property myself. As you look through this property, you're trying to gauge quickly, hey, what are the intangibles about this property that I need to look out for? And what are my general renovations? And you can see here, we probably have to renovate the flooring. I generally try to replace all the carpet to try to make it so that there's less maintenance. But there is some cool parts here. Now, as you go down, you see that, hey, it's got a nice lake view. Awesome. It's got a backyard. Awesome. A little bit older, a little bit dated, not like the modern pool sides where there's like cool decking on it or anything like that. So that might be something that we want to kind of adjust and change as you think about all your properties that you are competing against in your market. For example, in Phoenix or Scottsdale, we've seen that a lot of the pool decking is like this brown tan color. So we decided to update our pool decking in our properties, and that I'll show you in a short minute, to a gray color. So it pops and it reflects a little bit differently. And this way it can catch the eye of people that are scrolling. So cool. We just went through all the photos. The first thing I would do is I go to AirDNA. And when you go to AirDNA, usually there's this free data point. It's called rental demand. If you look at it all the way up here, that's going to be rental demand. And you're going to see here that's this 83. Okay. My minimum threshold is trying to use a rental demand of 60 or higher. Anything lower, there's no way I'm going to buy a property in that market. And I'm just going to show you here, like this number right here says 96. So don't settle for very, very low demand markets, especially when there are high demand markets just like that. Now, this is how I determine that 60 threshold based off my experience. I'm not saying everybody needs to follow this. This is just based on my experience. When I first bought this property on our Airbnbs in Scottsdale, Arizona, the rental demand was about 60 something. It's now 75, maybe because there's been more demand or pickup in the market. That's okay. And I'm going to show you why I've decided to pick that market. So let me pull up my Airbnb so you all can look at it. Okay, bring this over to the screen. So this is our property in Scottsdale, Arizona. As you can kind of tell, it is designed for a girl trip. My wife and I designed and came up with a theme. We have cute little murals. We have a beauty bar for girls to kind of get ready at. They are able to get ready for a bachelorette trip, or we also wanted the home to be able to double up as a place where ladies can get ready prior to a wedding, etc. She said yes. We said Scottsdale. We have some very Instagrammable moments on this property. We designed it well. We staged it with a little bit cocktails and a bar cart. Over there, we got some nice contrasting colors with the pink and the teal. And this is our home. We made sure we had a Peloton in there for our user base and our guest avatar. We figured there are folks that want to exercise while or have the option to exercise while they're on vacation. And this is how we decided to market the property. Now, as you can see, in this property, we have been able to exceed our own expectations when we first started. So let's see, we're able to pull up the calendar. So this is the calendar for that property, heated pool, Peloton LSLA. And you can see our numbers: $3,000, $6,000, $3,000, $4,000, $4,000, $5,000, $3,000, $3,000, $6,000 weekend. Cancellation $1,600, $2,500, $4,000. Cancellation again $2,300. But then we lowered the price to attract these numbers. So these are real numbers, and we have learned that as long as the demand is there, we can develop a product that is going to be able to stand out on itself and attract guests as long as we have a superior product that is well designed and we cater to the guest experience. So that's why I decided to pick the numbers. Like, what other markets are there that people ask me about all the time? Yeah, Lake Tahoe. I get asked about Lake Tahoe all the time. As you can see, the rental demand is only 53. Maybe because it's very seasonal. Who knows? But for me personally, because of all the regulations that are in that area and also how high the rental demand is, I just don't even bother looking at South Lake Tahoe as a market that I want to invest in for short-term rentals. And this is how you quickly filter out if someone sends you a deal or sends you a property, how do you quickly decide whether or not you want to look into further? Because what I have spent and made the mistake of doing in the past is I have spent so much time burning so many hours analyzing so many deals that probably would have never made sense. And I just wasted all that time analyzing anyways. So that's the first filter. Going to rent AirDNA, looking at rental demand, and that's what I use personally. It should be free. I'm not sure if they're charging it or will charge it in the future, but for me, I have a free account and I can see the rental demand number just fine. The second thing I do is I Google this local city, the local county, municipality, whatever it is that is the governing agency that will regulate short-term rentals. And I try to understand, hey, am I able to run a short-term rental legally in this market? Now, when I went to go Google San Diego short-term rentals, this is what it popped up. It shows you exactly how many licenses are left for property. So they received 4,100, they issued 3,900, they have 1,500 left, which means really they can only take about 1,300 more licenses for short-term rentals in San Diego. But that's good. I want to know that it's legal. And on top of that, I also understand that I have a very limited amount of time left to secure a short-term rental. And this also helps because now I know that there is a cap against the supply. So a lot of people have talked about like, hey, is it oversaturated, blah, 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 blah. Well, there are 7,000 Airbnbs in Scottsdale, but we're able to stand out with our design, with a product, with a better experience. And now that we have a good review history, that allows us to outperform the market. Similar concept here. Like I think this is actually an advantage if you were to get a short-term rental. I'm not advising it. This is not investment, financial, legal, or accounting advice, but that is what I'm talking about. You have to look up the regulations because I, for one, would never, ever want to risk anybody's capital investing in an area where with a snap of a finger, they can take away your short-term rental license. So something for you to think about. And so for this part, we just want to make sure it's legal. Okay. The third step, and I'm going to pull up this browser here, is now I'm going to get towards a market research from a geographical standpoint. So let me pull this browser over so we're on the same thing. We are going to look at Price Labs. So I use a third-party data website. It's called pricelabs.co. That's .co. I put in a link in the YouTube video too, just so you all can have access to it readily available. And from there, you are able to put in the address of your subject property, your neighborhood, whatever it is. I'll probably put like 50 kilometers. It generally costs about like $5 to $10. Hit show dashboard. And when you hit show dashboard, it brings you up to this market dashboard function. With this market dashboard function, you're able to filter on a bedroom count. I already did it for 5 to 6 bedrooms. So that's the property that we're comparing to. And I am coming down here and I'm looking at a few things. So this is La Mesa, which is just right next to San Diego. And this is what I do. I kind of do this little thing, what I call is a hover trick. When you look at this property and look at this box at the bottom of there, it says revenue past 365 days. It says 295,000 roughly. So I'm going to use 300 grand. What I'm looking for is, hey, as I scroll and go to the right, do I see other comparable properties that are making 300 grand? See some 250s, see some 350s, see some 400s. Wow, that's a lot. See some 250, 255s. Cool. This is like very, very nice homes. You can click on them as you want. For 400 grand. Let's see what this property looks like. Wow, with the water slide and everything. Okay, cool. So that's what I'm looking at. 500 grand. These are really, really high numbers, huh? This is 350. Oh, 350. Okay. Seems right. Then what you're going to want to come down here is okay, for column filters, you're going to want to put in a few items. You're going to want to put in max guest, just because if all the top performers sleep 16 people, you should be designing your property to sleep 16 people or 16 plus, whatever that may be. Bathrooms are really important. Listing type is really important because you want to compare apples to apples. You want to understand, hey, is this a condo against a condo? Is this a house versus a house? These are all very important attributes so that you're comparing apples to apples and finding a good comp. Then I always put in a hot tub, put in a pool. I always put in pets allowed just to understand like whether or not it's a market that allowing pets is a mandatory item. since a lot of folks got pets during the pandemic. And finally, estimated occupancy, estimated revenue. After you get all these data points, what I then do is I just download the CSV and I export it. Then what I do is actually I go through every single property and I try to understand and click at, hey, where are my top properties? So I highlighted a few just so you're aware of what I'm looking at. And I would just kind of go in and say, figure out, hey, does this property resemble what I just saw on the MLS? Because that is how I want to evaluate how much money based on gross revenue for the year can my property make? Because that number is the most important number probably for you to get your analysis started. Obviously, expenses matter a lot as well, but that is very important. You have to get the gross revenue number right. And part of that compares and comes from understanding what a true comparable property is. Hey, if you're liking this so far, please make sure you comment, like on the bottom in the comments, and make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. And we're going to keep on going. So I'm actually going to show you the end, what you're actually trying to do as you go through each and every single market. What I would recommend for you to do today is simply wherever you live, go to Airbnb, look up the market, see what the rental demand is. Awesome. Or another thing you would do is go plug in your home address, go to Price Labs, ask for the closest 1,000 listings. And just then and there, you would have taken a step towards the path of understanding and analyzing a deal. And that's only going to give you more repetitions and the confidence it's going to take for you to lock in your first deal. So here's what we are going to do. I am going to show you my master comp list, and this is going to be good. This is going to be good. For every single market. So here's a good representation. This is the Hocking Hills in Ohio. And this is what you're trying to do with all the data. You're trying to separate all these different types of properties into their respective categories based on those intangibles that we talked about earlier. For this market, here's what I did. I looked at one, where are all my homes with lake access, lake views, and lakefront? Then I had a section for our traditional homes with pools. Traditional home just means like drywall, siding, vinyl siding, whatever that may be. I have my A-frames. I have my log cabins with our vaulted ceilings and just some other outliers if I see anything along there. Here's the important part. There is what I have heard from a podcast. So not just like very common rule some of the other investors use. They have the 20% rule. That means if a home, let's take this house as an example. This is a lake house in the Hocking Hills. And what you're going to figure out here is, okay, this property has a gross revenue of $90,000. Okay. $90,000. I want to multiply that by 5. Why? Because in general, that's my rule of thumb after analyzing so many deals. That's how I decide, hey, for a house that looks like this, if it makes $450,000, I mean, if the purchase price is $450,000 to $500,000, then I'll take a closer look at it. So I clicked on the link and here's the house. Boom. All right. It's got a lake view. It's got a really nice backyard, I think, in my opinion. It's got a decent inside. It's got some dark photos that there's probably some rooms for improvement. But here's the important part. Now I can go and tell all my realtors, wholesalers, wherever you're getting your deal flow from, and communicate your buy box for that market. Now you can tell a realtor in the Hocking Hills, like, hey, if you ever see a home that's $450,000 to $500,000, it looks like this, please let me know and I'll pay attention to it. But if I see that all my lakefront homes in Hocking Hills are $1 million, I'm not even going to look into it further because that's how I know that market is so far beyond what's profitable. Now, you might adjust that rule from a 20% rule of thumb to a 50% rule if you're trying to buy in a market that you really love. Maybe you really love skiing. Perspective of what you want to buy and where it's and what is its chances of making a profit. So this is different for every single market, right? So here's another market I get asked about a lot. This is a market in Joshua Tree, California, near the national park. As you can see, I only separate out my properties and I am only looking at properties with pools. So here I got some 4 properties here, and these are all my isolated properties, which means they don't have neighbors next to them. Down here are all my homes and neighborhoods with adjacent properties. So that means there is a neighbor right to the side of it. And when I see that there's a neighbor right to the side of it, I don't want to pay more than X price. So as you can see here, here's some 3-bedroom properties, and these folks have neighbors next to them. And I'm going to be like, okay, well, these properties have neighbors next to them. So even though it's really nicely designed, it's only making $80,000. So I don't want to pay more than 5 times that. I don't want to pay more than $400,000 for a home in Joshua Tree for a 3-bedroom property, even if it has pool, if it has a neighbor. If I see any properties close to that, great. If all my homes there now are 600 grand in Joshua Tree, I am not going to even dive any deeper into that property. Okay. So now you understand what you're actually doing when you go through these market dashboards. You are clicking all through all of them one time, and you are understanding, hey, for this market, this is how I should look at that market. So you can figure out what is your buy box for that market, communicate that to the realtors, and then subsequently only looking at deals when they meet that criteria, because you are busy with your day. I'm sure you might have kids, you have school, it doesn't matter what it is. You just want to be able to communicate something that's very specific so people know what you're looking for and help you look for those types of properties. Now, as you kind of go through and look at different sort of properties, this is what you're going to do next. Maybe this is going to be a really, really good way to look at it. So some of you might be scared and say, hey, I don't want to buy out of state. Like, how do I know whether or not it's a good location to buy? This is how you do it. So I'm going to take some of my Price Labs export. Like here is Charlotte, a market that I have analyzed before. And this is what I did personally. You can go in here and click at just a random listing. Let's pick one. And what you're going to do is you're going to come down here and you can just look at, hey, where is my closest neighborhood in this property? Okay. Now you're going to write that down. And then what you're going to do is you're going to do some couple more searches. And this is why you want to do it. You want to figure out how and who. So how are you going to design it? And who are you going to cater to from your Airbnb perspective? So you're going to type in the word family. It's going to count up for you how many times has the word family been mentioned. Maybe you want to see if girls are bachelorette trip. Only 2 times. Does any bachelorette trip come here? No bachelorette parties there. Then you want to type in the word location. And you see how there's generally a positive connotation here with the word location. Is in a very good location, great location, wonderful location, nice location. The location, we loved everything about it. That is how you determine where you should buy your properties in that market. Because when you export this correctly, here's my top 50 3 to 6 bedroom properties by revenue. And everything you see here that's white on the top, that is a simple export out of Price Labs. Everything that's yellow is something that I do personally myself. And depending on your market, that's how you do it. You have your neighborhoods of all your top properties. You have how many times is the word family mentioned? 351 times. Then you look at how many times the word girls trip is mentioned. It's only 40 times. So it's not a big girls trip type of market, at least based off the top 50 revenue data. But now you know exactly where people want to stay. And look at the word location. Look at this neighborhood, 3rd Ward. Now, even if you've never been to Charlotte before, you can just come down in here and figure out, like, hey, why is this property so popular and in such in demand? And even though it might not be loading, 3rd Ward, Charlotte, North Carolina, you can kind of see 3rd Ward is basically a very busy district right in the downtown of Charlotte. So now you know why, right? Cool. This tells me people actually want to stay downtown, right? In some markets, maybe they don't want to stay downtown. Who knows? Who cares? It's based off of the data. You're not making it up. And this gives you actual data and support for why you want to buy a home in that certain market. And using that 20% rule of thumb, right? Let's see, how much does this property make? $96,000. So let's just use round numbers as an example. So this is a 4-bedroom property, making 100 grand a year. So I don't want to pay more than 500 grand for a 4-bedroom home in the 3rd Ward in Charlotte. There you go. That's your buy box. If every home in downtown that's 4 bedrooms, that's 2.5 baths, is like $1 million plus, you know you need to move on and you got to look for another outsized opportunity because this market is not it. And this comes from repetition, doing it over and over, but this is how you figure out what to do. So I'll even show you an example. When I first started, I was not sophisticated, right? But here's the top 200 bedroom properties by revenue in Scottsdale. When I first started, I looked at families. So number of time family was mentioned 1,200 times. How many times? You see the sum right here on the bottom? 1,000 times. That's how we figured out how to niche down and cater to a girl's trip or a bachelorette trip. It's because almost 40% of the reviews for the top 200 properties in Scottsdale are actually catering towards. And that's how we decided to niche down. It was based off of data. It wasn't because someone told us, hey, I had a really great girls' trip here in XXX. There was data actually supporting it. And that's how you really figure out how far from a certain point of interest can you be to determine, like, hey, I want to be within X miles or X amount or X minutes of Uber drive or something like that from a certain destination. That's how you use the data to figure out and determine that. Then as you get more and more sophisticated, write down the neighborhood, write down the families. And this is how you are proving to yourself that this is a good area to invest in, to buy in for short-term rentals. And that's how you really understand what your buy box is. And now, not only if you have an excuse of saying, hey, I don't have any money, I can't afford this. This is how you go raise capital, raise private capital by showing this process of how you analyze what a deal is a deal and actually sharing with folks, hey, this is why I think that this is a good investment. I have done all the market research. Not only did I pick the neighborhood of what, when, and where we should buy, but I also figure out who are my primary drivers. If it's all families, you should lean all the way in. Make it so that the family is not even stressed at all about coming and vacation with you. If you have the stroller already, if you have high chairs, if you have a crib or a pack and play, or baby proofing your cabinets, that's what's going to separate your property from any other property that's going to be coming onto the market. Now, there's only going to be more and more supply coming onto the market because Airbnb is still considered one of the top highest cash flowing asset class for real estate, especially for the retail investor. So with more supply coming in, your goal now is to make sure that you get a very, very good review base, get as many 5-star reviews as you can so that you can stand out even when more competition is coming in, and they'll have a harder time catching up to you, even because you have been established in that market for so much longer. Now everybody's looking at you on the spreadsheet like this to figure out how do I design my property like this guy or gal so that I can also mimic a top performer. You should always be playing to win, and that's my general advice. Again, not investment advice, not legal advice, not accounting advice. Smash a like if you like this. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel because we are going to keep on rolling. So what have I done so far? Just to kind of recap, we talked through 1, how do you get the rental demand? 2, making sure it's legal. 3, doing a geographical analysis to figure out, hey, as you go further and further away from a certain destination, do you see cliff or drop off in revenue? Based off of that, determine your buy box. You figure out what neighborhood you want to buy based off the data. And then you also understand just exactly what max purchase price you want to do. The next thing I want you to focus on is we've only looked at historical data, right? Using Price Labs, AirDNA, Data Rabu, all these other different websites, it's always historical looking. In order for you to get some, like I was really, really scared when I was buying my first property. So I was looking for ways to figure out, hey, I've proven this to myself that 1, there's a bachelorette desire for this market, but am I actually seeing demand for that property in the future? Meaning, am I seeing actual bachelorette homes being booked out? So here's a tool that I use, and I'm going to bring this up now. This is a tool. It's called Rankbreeze, RANKBREEZE.com. And using this property, 1 second, it is loading. I'm going to come down here. You can use it for a couple of things. The one thing I use is I use it to underwrite future data. You can also use it to compare your calendar to bookings. You can also use it for tracking how high you are on the Airbnb search algorithm based on what cover photo you're using, based off of what you are using in your listing title. Sometimes it might help if you put in amenities, or maybe you put in something like girls trip or something like that, right? Something that catches the person that's scrolling through Airbnb's listings and trying to figure out, is this listing right for me? I personally never put anything like 4 bedroom or 5 bedroom or how many baths or whatever things like that in the listing tag, because I think that's a waste of space because there's already a filter for it. I will put in something like girls trip, heated pool, especially if it's like a winter or something like that, or distance from a destination. Like if there was a Super Bowl, you maybe want to put in that. Like that's how I got $6,000 booking for that weekend for my Airbnb. So here's a couple of things on this website. The most important part here is this competitor calendar. On this competitor calendar, anywhere that you see a blue bubble is a night that's been booked. And then anywhere you see the number is a rate that's been booked for. This is why we decide to actually figure out, how am I going to underwrite? So before we saw that this home was making about $350,000 in San Diego or La Mesa, right next to each other. And I'm going through here and saying, well, this home is making $350,000. Like, let me make sure I prove it out that it's still in demand. What if like another listing came onto the market and just absolutely dominated this market and says like, hey, this is now rendering, like maybe it's oversaturated. But you look through this listing, it's not, there's nothing really special about it. I would argue like this isn't even like a professional photography. So in my mind, I see opportunity. But I might be thinking to myself, like, hey, am I really gonna put in this water park or the slide in there with all the liability? Doesn't matter. The data says this type of property makes $350,000. So now you have a decision to make to yourself, like, hey, if I think I have a home that's only gonna make 250, what am I gonna do to my home to give it more chances of making 350? Because our goal is always to beat the competition. So in my opinion, I always have to exceed what's in there. Now you have to take into account like, hey, is that slide going to be a liability? Is that a risk that we really want to take on? Those are all your personal decisions. Against, this is not investment advice. However, if I'm going to use an average nightly rate of $1,000, I need to see that this property is being booked out for $1,000. So this line right here, you said this property is $999, $999, $999, $999. So if I'm seeing that on average, this home's average nightly rate is $1,000 to $1,200, then I will start figuring out, oh, there's some 555s in there. So this is what you're looking for. Now, here's why you also use this. Sometimes when there are owners that are getting ready to sell their property and they want to game the system, quote unquote, because they understand how it works, right? How Price Labs works is they ping every single listing based off of like a certain rhythm. Maybe it's weekly, daily, or monthly, or quarterly, doesn't matter. They're assuming that every single night that it's been blocked off, that's a rate it's been booked for, regardless of whether or not it was an owner's block. Meaning someone might have said, hey, I need to repair or remodel the bathroom this day, so I'm going to block off 2 nights. Or here is a really, really good example. This is a property in Nashville, Tennessee. You see that's blocked off all 30 days? It's almost impossible, right? If you really think about it, normal Airbnbs aren't booked every single day, unless they might be like a 1 bedroom, someone's staying for a really long time. But this calendar right here, you can see that they actually blocked off every single Wednesday. So what that's going to do to the numbers, it's going to overinflate the numbers. And this was much more obvious like a month ago when they didn't get booked out this far in advance. But this is how you can quickly realize like, hey, there's something off about the calendar here. Every single night shouldn't be booked. Or why is every single Wednesday of this property being booked out for? So if I notice that, I might go to this property, which is a property in Nashville, Tennessee. And this property right here makes National Original Bachelor House, makes $275,000. If I learn that this property is blocking off every single Wednesday and maybe it's blocking off like $1,000 a night, I need to subtract $50,000 from this $275,000 number. Because I would be overestimating my revenue if I purely relied on price labs data. So this is why I'm cautioning you and urging you to look at the data, not just on price labs, but also using other tools like Rankbreeze, and also understanding, hey, how do I estimate revenue correctly? Because there's so many flaws like this in the data that could cause you to lose a lot of money. Imagine you thinking your property is going to make $275,000 and you only going to end up making $200,000. That's going to be a really, really bad scenario. Chances are you might be losing money. You might have to do a capital call and ask your partners to chip in money to cover for the mortgage, especially with how high the interest rates have gone. This is really important to get right. But not only is it to prove it to yourself, but it's also to prove it to your investor that might be a good deal, especially if you are seeking other partners to chip in or go in a deal with you. Doesn't matter what it is. Again, this is not a solicitation for any sort of investment, but I am simply sharing the information of what I have learned and what I have used to alleviate my own fear of before I entered a deal here. So that's what you would do with Rankbreeze, okay? It's going to be really, really good for you guys to track like your rankings. So sometimes like, hey, you see that I was on page 2 in March 7th, and you can see like after all my listings got booked, it tanks. It tanks to like page 14 and 16. Crazy, crazy stuff, right? But that's the stuff that you need to play with. You need to get people to wish list your property. You need to optimize for your title. And you got to figure out like, hey, at what point and not did I change the title, or did I change the rankings? Like, where do my rankings actually go? Because this is going to be a very, very important tool for you to use when you're tracking the performance of your data. It's like right here, boom, as I'm looking at into other properties, you can see other properties booking for like $4,000 a night. Here's a really, really good one. This property is actually a 8-bedroom property, but it is a combined listing of 2 4-bedroom properties. Why am I showing this to you? I want you guys to understand, and ladies to understand, this is how the flaw happens in the data. As you can see, this is an 8-bedroom listing, but if you look at the photos, it's actually two listings from this attached townhome that's being combined into one listing. That means if you only looked at the price up there for this listing as an 8-bedroom property, any single night that's booked in, as you can see right here, it says $4,600 a night. But why is it blocked off? It's blocked up because this 4-bedroom listing is empty, but this 4-bedroom is booked at $1,545. So just because one of the sides is booked out for $1,545, it's blocking off a date that says it's been booked for $4,700. And that's how you end up overestimating your revenue for this property if you were to purely just use what you got from Price Labs, from Data Rabu, whatever, without actually looking at data. This is so important. I can't emphasize this enough. People just haphazardly like analyze these deals, and they buy properties thinking it's going to make X amount of money, but they never actually truly took the time to analyze the data. But hey, in this property, like you want to look into the future to see where or not things are being booked. If you're in Charlotte, like we're looking at earlier, you want to look at some top performers, and you want to look into the future. Like, hey, if it's a bohemian vibe that's being booked out, great. If you see a lot of blue bubbles in the future, awesome. Then you start figuring out like, hey, this is the type of property that I need to mirror and go after, because that type of property, someone at some point said, let me go book this property first before somebody else books it, so that I don't lose out on this property because it looks way better than everything else. When you see that, that's a great indication for you to just simply take, hey, Miss Designer or Mr. Designer, this is an example of a high performing property. Can you please beat this in your design? Beat it in terms of amenities, design, color pop, color schemes, whatever it is that you think. But now you have data support. Why is this property your benchmark if you are playing to win, and what are you trying to measure up to? And then that will allow you to estimate your expenses and what amenities you need to buy or install on your property a lot better, with a lot more comfort, based off at least some data that supports your thesis, whatever that may be. So this is going to be really important. This is where you take emotions out of the deal, and you don't ask like your friends and family about their opinions, especially if they're not designers. More importantly, you should work with designers that have had a track record of success with properties. I personally don't design the properties myself. We just came up with the vision, the idea, the general theme and color palette. And we just shared that with the designer, and she helped us pick out all the individual examples and individual furnishings, all that stuff, color scheme, wallpaper, etc. It was based off of some data, but then we let her really roam free because she already had a track record. So awesome. Just to kind of recap, you now know and you should know how to estimate gross revenue. You will first look at rental demand. You will look at whether or not it's legal to do so. Look at a geographical analysis to figure out, hey, is there a drop off or a cliff in revenue the further and further I get away from the system? I now know I need to go through every single listing from my market dashboard. If it's a market I really care about, at least look at the first 20 or 50 properties, and I can figure out, hey, these are my top properties. Here's all my neighborhoods. Here's all the times that the word location is mentioned. I even put in the word golf or concerts or walking or walkable. So you understand where and how important is walking distance to your guests in your market. So these are all the things that are going to be important. And these are all the things that are going to be important for you to know, because this is going to give you the gross revenue. And then what you do is you validate that with Rankbreeze. And I'll even show you what I personally do with that data. This is what I've been doing on a weekly basis to track the data. As you can see, this is the property that we just looked at in La Mesa. And what I've been doing is every week I've been refreshing this data and notating what days has it been booked for. Boom. This was a new booking. So you can see that, hey, was this, if I see that May was entirely blocked out, it's a little unbelievable. But if I see that it actually transitioned and then it got blocked out, I might say, okay, it's a little bit more believable that entire month of May is blocked out. And as you kind of go through, you can track like, hey, how often is it canceled or how often is rate being changed? And I've been just tallying up these numbers at the bottom. So I track all these numbers. And here I am thinking like, hey, if this property, even though it says it was making $350,000 according to Price Labs, for the next 6 months, I only had $120,000 that was booked. So that makes me worry a little bit, right? Maybe it's because people haven't booked out that far in advance. Sure, that can definitely happen. But if I'm estimating a property makes $350,000, the room for error is a lot higher. So I might not be willing to buy a large property like this until next year, because I want to get really, really good data that I tracked manually myself that makes me and provides me the confidence to buy a property that's that expensive. But either way, let's go back to the original property that we were looking at. Let me pull this guy up so that we can look at the property again, and so you guys can remember what the purchase price was, or the sold price. $1.972 million. And I'm going to go through and pull up an Excel file now so you guys can actually understand like how I actually analyze a deal. So I plugged in the purchase price here. I put in $13.99 as a average daily rate. And what I'm doing here is like the most important number here is actually this number right here, the average annual revenue. And what I'm going to do is I play around with this number using this thing or an occupancy, just trying to get closer to the number. So if I do 43%, which is basically assuming 3 nights of every week is booked, so assuming like a Thursday, Friday, Saturday booking, that gets me to about 43% occupancy, and this gets me to a $219,000 annual revenue. So let's kind of play this out. We are going to assume like this is just the monthly revenues, 18 grand. We plug in insurance, you can get that from gas. I personally put in about $6,000 per bedroom. As a rule of thumb, this includes like some handyman setup labor and those expenses to actually estimate my revenue for furnishing a property. That includes handyman to actually build the headboards, frames, like hang up stuff, etc. I use premium mattresses, so my cost might be a little bit higher than some other folks out there. I put in about $8,000 for more common rooms. So think about your game rooms and stuff like that, where I put in poker tables before, shuffleboards, pool tables. We splurge on the couch quite often. We spent about $3,000 on that pink sectional that you might have saw in the earlier photo from our listing. So we always invest very heavily in the most used items. And we've literally had people call us about the pink couch and ask us like, where do we buy it from? Because they wanted to get a similar couch because they thought it was so comfortable. So if that was helpful, comment couch in the YouTube video and I will tell you exactly which model and which sectional did we buy for our property. And comment bed if you want to know what brand mattress that we actually use. That actually got us raving reviews on our property in our Airbnb listings reviews. And people literally message us afterwards like, "Hey, where'd you get the pillows from? Like, I would like to buy it for my boyfriend or for my family." We get those questions all the time, and that's how you know you really stood out from the competition. So again, we use $6,000, $8,000 per common room, and then we also added $30,000 to the backyard because that's how much we spent last time furnishing our backyard with like some sectional properties and stuff like that, fire pit, etc., dining tables, etc. So other remodeling costs. This is one of my biggest struggles when I first started. I was like, how much does it actually cost to renovate all these properties? So if you want, make sure you DM me on Instagram at invest with Kent He. Again, this is not solicitation for any sort of investments or any sort of funds, but I'm happy to just give you this calculator because I wish someone literally gave me this calculator when I first started. This is the list of all the different renovations that you might run across in your rehab. And this is probably not even all encompassing. I kind of took this spreadsheet and I modified it based on some of the costs that we experience in the Scottsdale market. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see a little bit better. So in every single property, I always, even assuming that, the roof is in perfect shape, I assume there's some money for repairing or patching the roof. There's a line for painting exterior. I normally don't paint exterior on my property because I don't like showing a picture of the outside of my home just because I think it's a little bit risky in case there are people that are trying to scam you or people that are trying to break into your home and they see that this is the Airbnb and it's empty. So maybe I should go look into that property and do some shady stuff. But either way, set aside some money for cleaning up the landscaping. $1,000. I spent anywhere from $500 to $1,000 just cleaning up all landscaping, especially when you are closing on escrow. A lot of weeds get overgrown in that area. I put in turf whenever I can instead of having grass because then it just provides less maintenance. It's like a one-time cost. I try to put in a putting green. And again, this depends on all the different amenities you might have in the market that you have seen from your top performers. So that's always going to be a good idea for you to think about. What do you want to put in? Like I put in basketball courts before at some properties for other folks. Pool heaters. A pool heater is almost a must, especially if you have a pool and people want to use it during colder times. You will be surprised by how cold the pool gets, even in a very warm market like Scottsdale, especially during the winter months where the desert winters really get really, really cold. So I always put in a hot tub, but again, it's gonna depend on your market, right? And you will be able to find what people actually rave about in your market if you again do those keyword searches that I was referring to earlier. Because let's see if I can find some cool ones for you, just so you can understand, like, hey, this stuff is really real. So hot tub. Sometimes people rave about the pool. People talk about it. Yeah, people talk about pool 84 times. So that tells you exactly how important it is in that area. Right? So sometimes you might buy a property and say, hey, is it worth building a pool? Well, this high performing property where half the reviews people actually mention the pool. Now, if you do this for other markets, like I've literally seen areas in the actual Black Mountain market where people talk about a steam shower, like a steam shower. So if you have a steam shower in your home, you might be able to stand out really, really well amongst your competition because you see how often these amenities are being raved about. And similarly, you can think about that for a hot tub. But as you go down, I usually paint the interior of all my properties, no matter what. A fresh coat of paint just makes it look a lot nicer. And for my designers, we always do like a paint plan. So they tell me exactly which wall is the accent wall. So I always incorporate about $3 a square foot for the painting. If there are any flooring updates, so LVP, I spent about $8 a square foot. So if you think the entire home's flooring needs to be replaced, you can just plug in the square footage here. But I knew that there was new flooring in one of the rooms, so that's why I didn't put the entire square footage of 3,500. I've only put in 3,000 square foot. And I knew the kitchen needed to be renovated. When I looked at the photos, it looked a little outdated. And if I'm going for more of a luxury market, yeah, this one is a little old. You see the backsplash is a little dated. So if I want to attract a certain type of market or clientele, and I want to go for the luxury market, I'm probably going to renovate all my properties with a higher end finish and then make sure I got some medium high end appliances as well. So I put in cabinets just in case for budget. A sink faucet. I always put in like a new sink faucet, especially if it's one of those farmhouse ones or the ones where you can kind of take it off the faucet and just kind of spray it around. I thought those were very useful. I always assume the garbage disposal is dated and needs to be replaced. It's one of those most commonly damaged appliance in Airbnb, just because people throw so much stuff down the garbage disposal and don't really care. For a large home like this, I would always replace the fridge. But for a large home like this, for 6 bedrooms, I imagine it's really, really big family. So I want to have 2 refrigerators in there. Again, this is really getting to the details, but I found that people actually really care about this. So make sure you like this and comment whether or not this was actually interesting for you to actually go this deep into the details. This is why I saved this for the very end. Sometimes folks just want to hear some general information in the beginning. So we have that. This is where we really get into the weeds. So hopefully this is helpful for you. We have about $8,000 per bathroom remodel. I put in 2 total bathroom remodels in this home. And why did I do that? I did that because they only showed me pictures of 1 bathroom. If you look through it on this listing, they only show me pictures of 1 bathroom, and there's 3 bathrooms. So they are probably hiding the uglier looking bathrooms from the listing. So that's why I decided to put in 2 whole bathrooms for a remodel. And if you ever need to add extra bedroom, I generally use an estimate of about $15,000 for that. You see that right here, toilets. I always replace all my toilets with high pressure flush toilets. And that's because I don't know if you guys ever have or you ladies have ever seen a clogged toilet. One of the most preventable issues, and this will save you so many headaches. If you think about it, if you had to send a plumber out there for an emergency like clogged toilet, it'll probably cost you about at least $300 now for labor and the time and the trip charge. With $300, I could just get a new toilet. I just get a higher end one for about $400 and I put in some labor. And that allows me to one, get this high pressure flush one so that even if there's a lot of toilet paper, it still goes down. Works wonders. I've only had one plumber call it for toilets in the last year and a half, almost 2 years now, actually. So loving it. I go for the high pressure flush toilets. And again, DM me on Instagram if you do want the spreadsheet. Happy to share this with you because I really wish someone shared this with me. I put in a tankless water heater. So with a larger home, I would hate for the home to run out of hot water. So at my Scottsdale property, I put in a tankless water heater so that it's always on a on-demand system. So it will always heat up whenever the time comes. For any of the areas that don't have a gas line, I actually paid a little bit more of a premium for a hybrid, a electric water heater, but it allows the water heater to regenerate a lot faster. Again, doing this work upfront prevents me from having more issues down later. And if you're really thinking about doing this seriously and doing this at scale, try to solve for all these problems way earlier because it will free your time up. And that's so important. It will free your time to look at more deals, to think about how to improve the space, do some more marketing, or just learning how to raise capital by going through the same process, showing the same process that I just showed you to your other potential friends and family who might be interested in learning about this stuff. I would always put in some money for a termite fumigation, but I know personally from my experience buying in San Diego, since I live here, the seller typically covers the termite fumigation if there is any. So I didn't have any here, but I did have to pay about $1,000 to do so in my Scottsdale properties. So all in all, this led to a total rehab budget of $123,000. And then what I do is I put in a 20% contingency. That's for things that, based off the photos, that's what I estimated rehab was going to be. But once I get on site and I'll look at some stuff, maybe electrical doesn't work, maybe there's something wrong with the walls, maybe I'll notice a leak in the ceiling. Who knows what I'll do? But I like to be a little bit conservative, and I put in extra 140, extra 20%. You're going to go through this tab. You're going to make the interest rate 8%. And we're going to go through this stuff. We're rental income. We have unexpected fees. Typically, like there's always some sort of credits, or whenever there's any issues, I just give a small credit back. So it's always good to assume that, hey, you're going to give at least 1% back of whatever revenue that you generate. Property tax is pretty straightforward. Insurance, you can get a quote. Cleanings, I put in $500 per clean, assuming 5 cleans a month. I think what we would do here is actually, it costs us about $200 per month for our pool service thing in Scottsdale. I'm going to assume at the minimum, that's what's going to cost here in this market. And property management, I put in 10%. You will often see 15 all the way up to 25% for the industry. I just charge a lower amount since I self-manage the property myself, and I also have equity in the property. Bookkeeping, if you and your partners agree that there should be a third-party bookkeeper, I prefer to have this because it shows my partners that there's someone looking at the books every single month. It'll probably cost you about $200, $225 a month. So these are real expenses, and you want to make sure you have it. This is the permitting, any sort of permitting fees, you just throw that in there, or sales tax reporting. That's very common in many states. I have $1,000 of utilities, which isn't that outrageous, to be honest with you. Our pool heater in Scottsdale, when it's fully running all the time, it's about $600 a month just for the pool heater. Add in another 100 for other utilities like cable, internet. You add in electricity and water, and gets to $1,000 really quick, really fast, especially when you have guests that are there and they don't care about how much water they're using, right? They're going to take an extra long shower. It doesn't matter. If you are forming an LLC, don't forget there's annual filing fees, especially if you live in California. You got to pay the $800 franchise tax. So don't forget all these expenses. Sometimes when people look at deals, they only look at what the PITI is, which is the principal, interest, taxes, insurance, but they forget about all these operational expenses that will quickly make you lose money if you forget about them. Then we left about $65 of repairs. And even if we never had to make any repairs, we're setting that aside because we know eventually we have to replace the water heater. Eventually we have to replace the roof. So it's unrealistic to think that's really in your pocket revenue when you know you had to set aside, because eventually you have to replace or fix something in your property. So going through all this process, if I go at 43%, after going through all this expenses with you, I always assume that there's a 6 months mortgage in reserves, because it'll probably take you at least, especially if it's your first time, it took us like 3 months to get the property designed, renovated, and also fully furnished, up and running, and with photos onto the platform. So it took us almost 3 months. And then you had to think about it. If you are launching your property in a slow season or after peak season, there is going to be a ramp up. You are going to take longer to get revenue, especially if you are a brand new listing and you're trying to drive revenue or traffic to your listing against a market that has a lot of other listings. So you're not the only one. So why do people look at yours, right? Chances are someone's going to book a very maybe a similar listing as yours, even if it's a well-designed property, but they have 50 reviews and you have 0 reviews. That's just how the game works, right? It makes it harder and harder as you get into the game a little bit later. So what I do is 1.972 million at 43%. I try to outline what does that equal from cash on cash. So at 43%, at $219,000, my cash on cash right now is actually a negative 4.7%. I'm actually losing money if I only make $219,000. That's what makes this stuff risky. If this gets to about a 63% occupancy, which I think is much more reasonable, because usually if I see any data on Price Labs that's making X amount of money, I should take up 10% off the number right away, just to be conservative, just to assume that I have a brand new just because I have a brand new listing. I can't expect to come out of the gates firing on all cylinders. Then if I try to get close to the number, what if I reach the maximum? So at 68%, this becomes a 10.3% return. So let's go back to 63. What does that get me as a medium case scenario? 7.3%. For me, this is not a deal. Why? My partners will at least look for at least a 10% cash on cash return, which means if you invested $100,000, you should at least get back at least 10% or $10,000 that year. Because otherwise there's plenty of passive investments or lending arrangements that are out there where you can make 10% passive really easily. So this is just not worth the risk at anything less than 10%. There needs to be more meat on the bones. Now, If it was 1.75 million, right? Think about what we talked about earlier. $350,000, 350 times 5, according to the 20% rule, 350,000 times 5, that equals 1.75 million. So if I saw a property that looked like that big backyard property and it was making 350, I don't want to pay more than 1.75 million. And you can quickly see why using this conservative scenario of 321, this becomes a 10.6% return. So that's how the rule of thumb works. It just gets you close to it. Doesn't necessarily mean it's true, but this is a rule of thumb for a reason. It just simply means like, hey, look closer at this deal if that is your rule of thumb. So this is why I have the rule of thumb. If that property was 1.75 million, I probably would have spent a lot more time on it because it was 1.9, almost $2 million. I knew that the revenue was not going to catch up to what I was looking for. So with that said, that was it. That was a whole underwriting session. Please comment below if you thought this was helpful. And please let me know you have any other questions. We'd love to do more videos like this for our readers and listeners and audience members. Hopefully this was helpful. This was a very in-depth analysis. I know we went through a lot of details, but yeah, hit the like button. Thank you so much for your time. And yeah, maybe we'll summarize one more time. This is the last thing you want to do. So let me kind of remove this from, so I have your attention. This is what you want to do. When you get a property, look at the AirDNA rental demand. Look at whether or not it's legal to do so in your market for short-term rentals. If it is legal to do so, then you go into a geographical analysis using pricelabs.co. With pricelabs.co, you can do a geographical analysis thinking like, hey, how far can I be away from a specific point of interest before my cliff or drop off in revenue it is? And that's okay if it drops off. You just got to adjust your buy box. Then you got to go to the market dashboard, export all those listings with those data attributes that we talked about. And using that, you are able to determine all your estimated revenue, number of gas, listing types, etc., or export that, going through every single listing, and then add your additional attributes that we talked about, which means doing keyword searches in the reviews to figure out what your niche is and who you're designing your property for, looking at all the locations and neighborhoods. So look at the neighborhoods within the Airbnb listing at the bottom, and then you type in the word location, and that's how you're going to get the number of times location is mentioned for that property. And then you can quickly see within your market dashboard for the top 50, 100, 200 listings, where do people actually want to stay for that short-term rental in that market. And from that point onwards, don't forget to use Rankbreeze, because Pricelabs is only giving you the historical data for the past 365 days. You're going to want to learn into the future how often is that listing being booked for, what themes are the most popular. So you think about like, hey, maybe it's a bohemian vibe, maybe it's a bachelorette vibe, maybe it's maybe just all depend on location. Who knows? Look at the data, and that would tell you exactly where to buy and how to design all that property. So hopefully this was helpful. I had a lot of fun doing this. So make sure you hit like, make sure you comment below if you had any other questions. And thank you so much for the time. Thank you for reading the article. Really, really appreciate it. Can't wait to talk to all of you soon. Thank you.